Good morning, everyone. Catholic Champion Show. I'm your host, John Yep. My co-host, Michael Hichborn. World at war. Israel attacks Iran, pulling U.S. in, but no one's really talking as much as we should about the just war theory, the time-tested proof of the litmus test of the morality of the act. Furthermore, we have the Catholic Church, which continues to be the center of the immigration, ICE deportation efforts, and it must be talked about. Stay tuned. Man, this is big. I've been waiting to talk about this, getting ready for this Wednesday show, Michael. There's so much going on since Israel launched their large-scale attacks on Iran. Michael, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm hanging in there. It's a Wednesday.
Grateful that you're not in Tehran or Jerusalem, correct?
Say it again.
Grateful that you're not in Tehran.
100%.
Or Jerusalem. 100%. You're safe. You're not 30 feet underground in a bunker.
Right. Right.
It's serious what's going on, people. I mean, again, in case you lived under a rock, which most people don't nowadays, so they have a cell phone next to them most of the day, are aware that on Friday night, Israel launched a large-scale attack on Iran. And we're going to get into this because, it was under the pretext initially of they were days away, unquote, from getting a nuclear weapon. People on Israeli side and American side, U.S. authorities were saying they were days away. But now it's kind of shifted a little bit to not just days away, but months. And it seems to be more about a regime change. But it's serious because this has obviously tremendous world implications. Keep in mind, this is not happening inside of its own little area. It's part of a global reality. And that reality is that there is another big war just a few miles to the north with Ukraine and Russia, okay? And then you have China and Taiwan, et cetera, right? So this is not just in a bubble. It affects a lot of realities, oil, energy, and many, many, many aspects. So it must be talked about. Now, yes, you can get the news from many other sources that do a fantastic job covering this, the ins and outs. But what we need to continuously bring to the public discussion is that just war theory. And we're going to get that later on as we talk about this war, that litmus test of what makes a war right. It's been handed down to us from, going back, to at least St. Augustine, right? So anyway, talk about the facts, okay? You have, let's go to the beginning of our initial thoughts, Michael, as you heard about this war breaking out on Friday night. What was the first thing you thought about?
Well, my first question was, if Iran was literally days away from producing a nuclear weapon, how did they get to that point? Why did intelligence and why did the intelligence community not have information indicating, gosh, they're sustaining this weapons making process and they're developing this processed uranium that's going to be used for the production of nuclear weapons? If that's the case, why did Israel, why did the intelligence community just wait until, they're days away from doing this, and then suddenly everything kind of all hell breaks loose? There's something wrong with the narrative, because you don't suddenly wake up one morning and go, oh my gosh, I forgot, Iran's been working on this and now they're days away from completion. That doesn't happen. So that was my first thought.
It doesn't happen. I listened to Sam Faddis, who is a former member of the CIA. He's a frequent guest on War Room, does a fantastic job. You can follow him on X. But his take was interesting about the whole intelligence, what you're talking about, Michael. He said, look, okay, there's other two possible scenarios here with this intelligence, what's going on. Either, because remember, this is the key. Tulsi Gabbard, okay, says in March in front of the U.S. Congress, on an official memo, and I'm not knocking Tulsi if she was wrong, because honestly, she just got there. She's 2 months into the job. She's really just handed a report and she reads it in front of it, so she reads what's given to her. Okay. That poor thing has got operating one of the most corrupt, also largest bureaucracies in the intelligence agencies. Right. So anyway, she was the instrumental cause by reading that document in front of Congress, which said that Iran was not pursuing nuclear weapons at all. Kind of gave it up in a really since 2003, and there was not really a serious threat. Okay, that was just in March. Okay,
Right.
How is it that 2 months later, 3 months later, we had Netanyahu saying they're days away? Okay, Sam Faddis, CIA member, had two takes. He said, number one, either it's that we were just completely off. U.S. was completely off, or we just had bad knowledge, and that's what Tulsi reported, or it's the Israelis knew a lot more, and they had the real story. So we were dependent on the Israelis, or they're lying. Okay, so it's one of those two. Either the Israelis knew more than we did, or the Israelis were lying, specifically Netanyahu, right? Both of them are bad, okay? Because that puts us in a situation where, as a country, we are now dependent upon following the intelligence of a different country like Israel to make a very serious decision. I mean, what do you see? How do you see that, Michael?
Well, I see that as the shaping of a narrative, unfortunately. I mean, I understand propaganda, and I know how propaganda works very, very well. And one of the things that we know is that if you are trying to get somebody to your position, one of the ways to do that is to surprise them with information and say, we have to work urgently to get this fixed. Otherwise, all hell's going to break loose and everything is going to be bad for you. It's a surprise tactic. Now, Israel is ostensibly a United States ally. And with that in mind, if the intelligence community trusts them, then, you simply go with what they want. But the problem is, all with self-interest, especially if they have a powerful ally and they want to get that ally to do what they want them to do, they're going to use some sense of urgency with some sense of proportionality in the information that they share, and to get what they want. So I don't trust the intelligence. I certainly don't trust something that's a surprise information. If you're going to surprise me with information, I'm not going to sit there and say, okay, we have to work and act urgently on this information. I'm going to verify it. I'm going to double down and say, okay, fine. Thank you for letting us know. We'll look into this and we'll get back to you. That's how you handle that situation. You don't just suddenly drop everything and go, oh my gosh, we're going to send all our carriers over there and start, hammering away at this country because, wow, it's Wednesday and I didn't realize that that's nuclear weapons day. It's not something that you do.
It's not. Now let's play this. So we're going to play a clip in a second, but Netanyahu on Sunday, Brett Baer interview, Fox News says that they were days away, blah, 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 blah. Okay, it's kind of what there was a pretext. Days away. Let's play that clip from 1996 from Netanyahu, and let's see what he said.
It's getting extremely close. And Iran, by the way, is also outpacing Iraq in the development of ballistic missile systems that they hope will reach the eastern seaboard of the United States within 15 years. By next spring, at most, by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb. The foremost sponsor of global terrorism could be weeks away from having enough enriched uranium for an entire arsenal of nuclear weapons. That would place a militant Islamic terror regime weeks away from having the fissile material for an entire arsenal of nuclear bombs.
If not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
Well. Okay. That's what just gets, you heard him. I mean, they've been saying this for forever. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not only Netanyahu, but our own members of Congress. For instance, our dear friend, that's a pun, Senator Lindsey Graham out of South Carolina, has just been insanely going after this war and promoting this war. His first comments when the Israel struck was, game on, pray for Israel. It's not a game, Lindsey, okay? It's absolutely not. Now, thoughts on that, Michael, when you saw that?
Well, immediately what came to mind were the same things that come to mind every time I hear somebody talking about how global climate change is going to destroy the world in 10 years. You know, it's you can go back with the exact same talking points all the way back to the 1960s. In 10 years, if we don't change the way the earth handles industry, we're going to have the first global ice age since the early, 4000 BC or whatever it was. Then you get global warming in the early 1980s. Then you get acid rain in the mid 1980s. Then you get the hole in the ozone layer in the mid 1990s. And each time, in 10 to 15 to 20 years, we're not going to be able to turn back the clock, and the world is going to be completely uninhabitable by the year 2050 or whatever the talking point is. And then, of course, they keep pushing the goalposts. Netanyahu did the exact same thing. Since 1996 all the way to 2025, he's been using the same talking points, pushing the goalposts every time. Oh, it could be another year, could be another few weeks or a month. It's always the same. Now, one other thing that strikes me is that, and this is an anecdote, but it's something that I have spoken to other people about, and it seems to be true. My experience with Iranians, the Iranian people love America. They love us.
They are.
When I climbed up Mount Ararat last year.
You say that just like you're going to pick up a coffee at Starbucks. I mean, This guy literally went to try to find Noah's Ark last year. Okay. Become a monthly donor now on Catholics for Catholics. We'll tell you if he actually found it, and we'll give a special Zoom session. Okay. No, you didn't find it, but what happened? Keep going. You were there in that part of the world.
Yeah, I went up Mount Ararat. You have to understand, Mount Ararat is in Turkey, but it's right on the border with Iran and Iraq. So you can and Armenia, you can see the different countries from the top of the mountain. So as I was coming down the mountain, going up was a group of around 30 Iranians. Now, I'd never met an Iranian, and they spoke very little English, but one of them said, "Oh, where are you from?" And I said, "Virginia." And he kind of looked at me quizzically. I said, "United States." He goes, "Oh, USA." And then the rest of them, they all started chanting, "USA, USA, USA." Iranians, these people that allegedly hate us, they're all chanting USA. They didn't know me from Adam, but they heard that I was from the United States, and they got excited, and they were genuinely warm and friendly people. I shook hands with a bunch of them. They even took pictures with me. So, and the priest that was on the trip with us, I talked to him, and he said, "You don't understand." And he spent lots of time in Iran. He said, the Iranian people absolutely love America. They love Americans, and they are some of the warmest, friendliest people you'll ever meet. So you compare that with the talking points that we're getting about how Iran hates the United States. Iran wants to destroy the way our freedoms and our way of living. It does not seem to be true. You also have to understand there are almost 500,000 Christians living in Iran.
I just checked it out. Actually, there's almost 500,000 to 1 million. That's what we know about. Probably a lot more, but they're too afraid to say it because of the government. But
right. So who's going to suffer from a sustained war? It's not. I mean, obviously the government's going to be upset and they're going to retaliate and things like that. But it's the people. Those people that I met going up Mount Ararat. Those are the people who are going to suffer. The Christians that live there, they're the ones who are going to suffer. The Christians that live in Israel, the less than 1% of the population that lives there, they're going to suffer. So if we're talking about what's happening in the Middle East, at least put a human face on it.
Put a human face on it, which we don't do today. This is just a game, like Lindsay says. It's not a game. I think also, so started off, nuclear weapons were days away. Okay. Maybe they changed the whole narrative partly because everyone was like, this is bogus. We're like, we've heard this before. Hashtag 2003. Let's not forget the whole context of why we went to war in 2003 was President George W. Bush said there were weapons of mass destruction there in Iraq. Therefore,
John Bolton was the one leading the parade.
John Bolton, Donald Rumsfeld, which precipitated that, caused that, attack on March of 2003. And we were there for 20 years, right? And I remember John Paul II in his last years there as Pope, frail that he was, just at that one Sunday Angelus, days before when America, it was like literally in this moment, almost when the when George W. was probably in the situation of determining whether they would go to war. It was imminent. And he spoke that Sunday before the invasion and just gave the most heartfelt. It wasn't he didn't read it from a piece of paper. It was an 80-year-old man, 82 years old, just desperately saying, please do not go to war. This is not just war. Okay. I've seen war. Karawati was said, I've lived through it. It does not leave, if it's unjust war, it's going to be more destructive. This is what's happening right now. This is playing out. Okay. Because nuclear weapons, I don't even believe that. I mean, really, it's just so hard to say. Even if it is true, how are we supposed to, with a straight face, just believe any of you on your face from our side?
More to the point, we've been lied to repeatedly.
Exactly. Yeah. We've been lied to. So, I mean, what's the proof? Okay. As Sam Fash from CIA said, look, ex-CIA, either the Israelis are lying to us or they have the truth and we're supposed to believe them. But again, their track record is not the best as well, right? It's not even the Israeli government. It's really Netanyahu, who's got a 30% approval rating in his own country. So really kind of unpopular. And he's the one leading the charge, okay? So it gets worse. We shift the narrative from weapons of mass destruction, okay, to regime change. Because even the attacks that were done on Friday night, yes, they were targeting some nuclear facilities, but I mean, give me a break. They were hitting all the core leaders. They didn't go after the big guy himself, the top religious leader, which may have been because Trump said, whatever you do, don't do that. And they were also hitting downtown theaters in Tehran, the capital of Iran. So, I mean, Michael, what do you think? I think it's about regime change, and it brings out the whole question of, is that moral or not?
I think it is about regime change. Now, part of the problem is that the United States has been an interventionist operation in many, many countries around the world throughout the Cold War, throughout the 1990s and 2000s, and even now today. Now, a lot of people will say, well, they were interventionists because the Russians, the Soviets, were also interventionists. So we had to be interventionists to counter their interventionism, which after a while, that your head starts spinning as to whether you're doing something right or wrong. You're just countering the counter narrative. There's really no rhyme or reason to it at some point. The question of regime change. Now, we put the Shah of Iran into power I think it was in the 1950s or the 1960s. Yeah, go ahead.
So glad you brought that up. Okay. This whole mess is because we initiated a regime change in the 1960s, 70s, right? Okay. Yeah, keep going.
So we intervened. There was a revolution in Russia in Iran in the late 1960s, early 1970s. My timeline is a little off. I'm not as keen on this part of history, but I do know the generalities. So you had the regime change, but then they got the Ayatollah, who was nuts. I mean, absolutely nuts. And a lot of people said that he was also a puppet of the Soviet Empire. Maybe he was, I don't know. But at the end of the day, you started having all this interventionism from the United States through the CIA, operating in Iran, working to foment revolutions, working to make arms deals, and who was involved in what. And, there's a lot of muddy water there, and it's really hard to tell exactly who was telling the truth, what was actually happening, and what really went down. By the way, I also question who benefits from the United States. And I would say in a lot of ways, it's the arms dealers. They're the ones that really do.
Yeah, no question. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way. What? I mean, logically, unless the guy really is a sicko and just wants a bunch of people dead, or just loves regime changes, Lindsey Graham, that he's calling for that. We know so many members of Congress are dependent on funding through these arms dealers, right? Raytheon and others, right? So Yeah, I totally agree there. There's not a sincerity. Those people are benefiting. There's selfish, one-tiered benefits to what they're saying.
So I personally, I don't see any real interest for the United States in these Middle East conflicts when it comes to war with Israel or war between two Muslim nations or whatever it is. The only interest in regards to the people of the United States going on over there would be, well, how is this going to affect our oil trade and oil production here at home? Other than that, what these two nations do to each other, or three or four, however many there are, what they do to each other really is not something that touches upon the necessity of the United States to get involved.
Now, okay, what about this though? Because certain says yes, but this is not South Africa fighting against a neighboring country, right? Or, Kenya fighting against Egypt, right? This is Israel, where our Lord and Savior walked. Okay, so there are Christians there, and there are Christian sites there that we do not want destroyed. So I don't want to see Jerusalem destroyed. I don't want to see Bethlehem destroyed. So if I have in my power, that's really the whole principle behind the Crusades of 1095, where Pope Urban urged everyone, an attack or a reconquista of the Holy Land is to protect it. So we do, I would say, in my opinion, have a certain interest as a predominantly Christian nation to make sure that those sites are protected. And if that means, to some extent, working with the local government, which happens to be Israel, okay, to ensure that they aren't destroyed, that would make sense, right?
To that extent, I would say that
but it also poses a problem, and we'll get into that. But yeah,
but it poses you compound the problem, because then you wind up drawing the United States into a prolonged war if the other nation actually gets to U.S. troops. And then, of course, now you've got a declared war between the U.S. and the other nation that's the aggressor. If the United States were to be involved with, say, a new Holy League called by the Pope, a crusade to protect the holy sites, wherein U.S. military forces are set to defend holy sites only as a defensive position without any offensive mandate whatsoever, I think that there could be justification for that. But in terms of being involved in an offensive measure against another nation, we have no interest there. And I don't think that we should be involved.
Right. And that's where it's not just you or me, Michael, talking about why this offensive war is not ours. Let's go to what the experts say. The experts being their patrimony of Catholic moral teaching from thousands of years ago. I think this has to be injected into the political conversation. We're a post-Christian nation in so many ways. We've got to be speaking up on the different platforms. Like, there is a morality, okay? It's not just what's most pragmatically advantageous to our nation or their nation or our party or this party. There are morals which, if followed, bring on the prosperity that God wants to give his people, okay? What are some of these principles? The just war theory. Let's get into that as we kind of look at the situation of what's going on in the world. Okay. I'll briefly give an intro, and then Mike, we comment on this a little bit, but you have just war theory, basically the idea that when you go to war, there are certain principles of the natural law, which is the participation in divine law, divine reason. That's what natural law is. Okay. That the human mind, independently of whether it's been revealed to them through sacred scripture, intuitively understands to a degree. Okay. So you have even BC, before Christ, you have the Egyptians. I was reading up on this, pretty interesting. The Egyptians, the Chinese, the Indians over in India, they all had their own ideas, albeit imperfect at times, of the rules of engagement, of when it would be okay to go to war, right? And also, kind of an underlying thread was that these different empires would always seek the support of the religious class, the priests, the priestesses, whatever, because they kind of understood that what they were doing was so important or so grave, the taking of another's life, that, you know, you want to be on good terms with the gods, right? So this existed even pre-Christianity, okay? And of course,
Right.
the Jews. Now, you get into St. Augustine. He's kind of the one that first really laid down some of these principles. But let's go into them, because I think it's important to just emphasize St. Augustine, perfect. You know, Pope Leo is an Augustinian. So how interesting that, you know, that link we have there. So, Michael, do you want to get into those points, or do you want me to just start myself here?
No, I'll go ahead and start, because I think that there has to be a particular order to them. The way that it's listed here, and I think this actually comes out of the Catechism, but the way that it's listed here is it's a little out of order, and I'll explain why. I would put
23, 27. Yeah.
I would put the second one listed, the second item here, I would put that first, where it says all other means of putting an end to it, meaning conflict, must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. In other words, what they're saying is that everything done to stop a war or to prevent physical conflict has been exhausted, and that there is no other practical means of putting an end to it. For instance, if you have an unjust aggressor entering your country, and you've got your diplomats begging and pleading with the leader of the other country, saying, we don't want conflict with you. We don't want to fight you. Please do not invade. Please do not fight us. And he says, nope, I'm going to march right to your capital, and we're going to slaughter every man, woman, and child living there. Well, you've exhausted all means. So in that sense, you can say that once somebody has already engaged in conflict, and you cannot, there's no way of preventing physical conflict, well, then you can actually initiate physical conflict. So the guy comes into your country, you're defending yourself, everything's been exhausted. You've already tried talking it out. You've already tried figuring out, maybe there's a trade option, maybe there's something that we can work out. They don't want it. You'd like to have it, but you can't have it. So that's the only, it's the last resort. So if we're going to talk about that in context with what's going on between Israel and Iran, the very first thing I would ask is, have they exhausted every last possible option before going to physical conflict? And I would say no. I would say no, absolutely not. They told us, well, it's about weapons of mass destruction, but we've got no evidence of that. They've been talking about that. I mean, it's like the boy who cried wolf. They've been issuing that same talking point for the last 30 years.
Okay, so but they would counter and say, because valid point, we didn't start this war. Iran has been conducting war, which is really true, through their proxies for the past 30 years, whatever it is, right? So this is not us initiating a war, and we're just continuing and carrying to completion. What would you say?
Well, first of all, I would say that if it's a proxy war, then you also have to extend that to what's going on between Russia and Ukraine, because Russia says that they invaded the Ukraine because the Ukraine had been engaging in a proxy war by hiring Chechen terrorists to go into Russia and start blowing things up and killing people in malls. And they've been enacting some sort of terrorist operation within Russia. So if they're going to make that argument on behalf of Israel, they have to accept that Russia's statement that Ukraine has been enacting a proxy war in Russian territory. They have to accept that as well. So it's a slippery slope, and it gets real dicey when you start accepting some people's arguments and not others. And this idea of a proxy war may or may not be accurate. It's possible that Russia or that Iran is financing Hamas, and that Hamas is building up and fighting against the Israelis. But without real proof, real evidence, or real means of putting an end to that particular aspect of this proxy war, how do you stop it? Well, you stop the finances going into Hamas. How do you stop the arms? Well, you close down the borders and you create a barricade. I mean, it's like, have all means been exhausted? And I have to say no.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And even like, at what point if any, is a regime change something that's the moral course of action, right? But maybe, Alan, did you finish going through those points? I don't want to cut you off there. I mean,
well, that was only, so that's why I said the second
here,
one should be put first, because really and truly, before you can start talking about the others, you have to acknowledge, okay, the means, every means available to not engage in conflict has been exhausted. The second thing that you have to take into account is the damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation or community of nations must be lasting, grave, and certain. Okay? That last part of it, and certain, is key to this question of whether Israel's attacking Iran is justified.
Yes.
Israel said, well, they were days away from, producing a nuclear weapon. That's not certainty.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, most likely most likely it's a lie based on the fact that they've been lying for 20 years, going back to the video clip we just showed, right? So, yeah.
Yep. So that one doesn't work. Then you have, there must be a serious prospect of success. Okay. I think that Israel could probably win against Iran.
Yeah, but what does success look like? That's the problem. What does that mean?
That is a problem.
Because
success on the battlefield does not equate success in the regime change, international community, or occupation. It doesn't mean that.
Because even if it is, they were seriously just 3 days away, and and they also said they didn't need U.S. help, they didn't want U.S. help. But now we're hearing from a lot of different sources, people on the news, that for them to really eradicate the nuclear facilities, it is impossible for Israel to do it by itself. Specifically, I think it's called like Fonbar. There's one nuclear site that most of them are like 30 feet underground, 50 feet underground, but there's one that's like 300 feet underground. And the only country that has the weapons capacity to destroy that is the wonderful United States, with our beautiful B-2 bomber, okay, which can drop a bomb on this bunker, which is like 200 feet underground. So Israelis aren't stupid. So they know they were going into this war. They knew if they really wanted to destroy the nuclear facilities, they knew they were going to get the U.S. help if they were going to carry that out effectively, okay? So, by the way, it's the other aspect, I'll just mention this in passing briefly. We're supposed to rely on the intelligence of this government, which is now trying to pull us into the war with them. These are the same people which somehow apparently missed the October 7th attack, which was took months in the making. Okay. Maybe they really missed it. Maybe they did. Okay. And yes, it was tragic what happened. Those kids were murdered. Yep. Absolutely. Just like the kids are being murdered right now. We've lost focus in Gaza. Thankfully, Pope Leo is speaking up about that. Even Trump is. Okay. So something's not adding up here. And so it's
so I actually want to touch more on the point that you made that with regard to success, what does success look like?
That's right.
Let me tell you something. It doesn't matter if the United States occupied Iran, or if Israel occupied Iran, or if a community of nations occupied Iran. The religious beliefs of the people will cause them to rise and to continuously fight against whatever regime is put into power over them in perpetuity. So what does success look like? It's going to look like Afghanistan. And it's
is that always true? Because look, the Second World War, there was a regime change. We destroyed the Nazi Socialist Party, and the people of Germany were very grateful. So I don't know if that's always true, right?
Germany was a Christian nation.
True. Yep.
Okay. Islam is a whole different story. And you're talking about a completely different ideology, and you're talking about a people that are absolutely dedicated to their belief and rising up against any infidel that would be put in place over them. They will always rise up against that infidel. So it doesn't matter if it's Israel, if it's the United States, if it's a community of nations. If they do not have Muslims ruling Muslims, then they are going to rise up and they will perpetually fight against that rulership, that leadership, or if it's a puppet, and they perceive him to be a puppet of the international community, whatever it is, they will fight and fight and fight, and it will never end. So when we look at what success looks like, you have to take that into consideration. And I will tell you, I do not believe for a moment that there will be any measure of success with that in mind if we were to talk about bowling in with tanks and taking over the area and putting someone else in charge. That will not be successful. You'll have Afghanistan 2.0.
Jack Posobiec had a great scorecard, he referred to it, about recent regime changes under the United States power. Okay, so you got Iraq. What happened? Chaos, death, Shia take power. Syria, refugees flood Europe, ISIS. Afghanistan, Taliban won, got our $80 billion of equipment. Libya, Benghazi, refugees flood Europe. Ukraine, massive war, countless deaths. And in every single one of these, Christians were killed in mass. Intentional or not, who knows? It's a fact, though. That's interesting.
Yep.
So, okay, I mean, one thing is talk about what the heck those two countries are doing, okay, which we care. You know, as a Catholic, we care about every life. And again, Iran's not a holy country. I mean, at least the governing power. We're not saying that by any means, right? They have been doing horrible things to their surrounding neighbors for decades, right? At least the governing power, okay? That's obvious, right? Going back to when they killed 240 Marines in the 1980s, right, with the embassy.
Right.
So we're not saying they're good dudes, right? The people are good, right? Like people of Israel are good, right? But it has to be weighed. But what matters here is how we are pulled into this. Do you see us getting pulled into this, Michael?
I see the very real possibility of us being pulled into it, which is what upsets me the most. Again, I don't see a real interest for the United States to be involved. There are a lot of people, especially the evangelical
in an offensive war, right? Because they're saying we should be involved defensively.
Well, I think the argument.
What does that actually mean, by the way? But yeah,
I think the argument could be made. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree. I'm just saying that the argument could be made. But in terms of an offensive conflict, being drawn into an actual war with Iran, I have serious problems with that, and I'm very concerned about it, and I'll tell you why. I'm concerned about the financial cost. I'm concerned about the cost in human souls, because the people that are going to suffer the most are the women, the children, and the Christians living in those territories, whether in Israel or in Iran, that are going to be caught in the crossfire. They're the ones who are going to suffer. They're the ones who are going to have brothers, fathers, and husbands who are going to be killed in this conflict. And it's one of those things that has to be considered when weighing the possibility of whether the United States should be involved or not. And I don't think you can sit there and say, well, we'll save more lives than lives will be lost, because you can't possibly know that. You can't possibly know that. And if you're adding another country to the equation, now you're counting the cost against American fathers, brothers, and husbands. Okay, you're looking at a whole nother level of it, and this is just the human cost. Look at the cost in terms of finances. What is this going to do to the world economy? What is this going to do with regard to the price of oil on a global scale? What is this going to do to the cost of goods here at home if we have a long protracted conflict going on in the Middle East? Then, and that again, it's just the finances. But what does it do to the stability of the world then if you draw the whole world into some sort of conflict? Because it's not just the United States that's going to be involved. We're going to have other countries getting involved as well, especially if you have China saying, yep, we're going to start sending arms to Iran, and we're going to make sure that Iran is defended. And, you know, you're going to have a whole community of nations involved in this conflict. And then what does that do once China's eye towards Taiwan starts to get a little green, and they say, you know what, we think we want that more than the United States wants to be involved in a conflict with us. So what does that do to the international balance of community? So you have to take all these things into consideration. And I don't think anybody really has taken a real measured account of all the things you have to consider of what it means for the United States to get involved in this conflict.
think President Trump is the man for the moment. Okay. And this is why we got to we'll end with a prayer for him in this, because he's the most powerful person in the world, at least on a political scale. Okay. And what is on his shoulders right now is absolutely enormous. Okay. So people are rightfully, and this has been great to see, his base has been up in arms saying, you cannot bring us into this war. Okay. So as President Trump has kind of said stuff recently over and over again, oh my God, whatever the cause, they cannot have a nuclear weapon, blah, blah, blah. Right now, I want to point out something with President Trump. When they say, okay, he's betraying what he ran on America, whatever. 2 days ago, we celebrated the 10-year anniversary of President Trump coming down the escalator. Okay. And that just one of the most historic moments in American history. Okay. What President Trump has done and faced. Imperfect man, but one of the greatest political comebacks of all time, especially in his last election. Okay. In that very first speech, people forget this. Yes, he was clear right from the beginning, immigration, and he was also the first Republican to say on a platform stage to the Bushes, of course, that Iraq was a stupid war. Okay. But in that first speech, even when he talked about everything else, is again, back when he walked on the escalator in New York, he said in 2015, Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. Okay. So this is something that's been very clear in President Trump's mind and desires. He's been open about it from the beginning. Now, I think we have to also give President Trump a couple benefits of doubt. Okay. Because his track record also has been pretty darn good. He was the only president that had never started a major war since going back to almost JFK, right?
Yep.
Secondly, what he's been doing now in his track record, trying to avoid conflict, American troops on the ground. Okay. So this is a man who understands not just the pragmatic effect of war, what it does to economies. Okay. It's a stupid business move. Okay. But also the loss of life. That really does move him. I believe that. Okay. Secondly, I think we got to give him a little bit of slack. Yes, we got to make our voices heard, but you have to understand, and Mike, I want your comments about this, because we think that when we all go to the polling locations and we vote on election day or in the lead ups in the weeks before, provided they're fair, which, too big to rig, that we elect President Trump, we're going to get whatever President Trump wants. The reality today of world governments, especially the United States government, which is the largest business in the world with employees, that just because President Trump takes power does not mean he has the power.
Right.
Yes, Kash Patel. Yes, Dan Bongino are in charge of the FBI. That's 2-3 appointees of President Trump. But there is an underlying thing that never changes. It's almost like a Christmas present that you get, and let's just say the Democrats win, it's blue wrapping. Okay. If the Republicans win, it's red wrapping. But the president itself never changes.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a little bit what happens with the government.
It's the annual fruitcake.
Annual fruitcake. So you're looking at President Trump, and in theory, even with Pope Leo, by the way, and that's why I cut him some slack when there was a couple kind of crazy, dumb things that were said from one of his offices in the week after election. Everyone was up in arms. Oh my gosh, he's a liberal. But I was like, come on, guys. The Vatican has a lot of people there. Okay. So just give him chill out, give him a chance to get a hold of everything. Right. But President Trump, is he really in control of what's happening? Yes, he wants to be, but look, the CIA probably killed JFK. Okay. Yep. So every president since has been looking over their back every time they want to make a strong move. Okay. So could this be happening? I mean, Israel, Netanyahu specifically, attacked. I don't trust him. I don't think most people do. Okay. 70% of his people don't. Okay. He initiated this war, lie, regime change, not a really great moral cause, and understanding, if not under agreement with the Mossad and CIA, are so close together that they probably are trying to pull President Trump and this administration into war. Is that a fair assessment, Michael? How do you see this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, come on. The intelligence community has their fingers in every nation on the planet.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that they don't have an agenda, because we've seen them have an agenda for at least the last 70 years. You mentioned the assassination of JFK. That was clearly orchestrated by the CIA. Very, very obviously had a hand in it.
For further research, I recommend our dear friend Roger Stone has been hitting us so hard about this, and I'm so glad he's speaking up about it. But keep going. Yes.
So, I mean, even before that, you had the Bay of Pigs that was orchestrated by Alan Dulles with ostensible permission from JFK. But JFK was also very clear to him, we're not going to get involved in any kind of invasion. We're not going to be drawn into any personal conflict between the United States and Cuba. And when the Bay of Pigs operation failed, as Alan Dulles wanted it to, he then said, we have to send in American troops to rescue our guys who are on the soil. And we weren't supposed to have people on the soil in Cuba. And so JFK was very upset and orchestrated his exit from the CIA. And that, of course, was shortly followed by his removal from this world. So the intelligence community has they have an idea in mind. They have an agenda in mind for world politics. The CIA was deeply involved in the Vietnam conflict. And what was their interest? Opium. Opium trade opened up through the Vietnam conflict. What was the CIA's involvement with the war on drugs in the 1980s? And why was Bill Clinton involved with the CIA as drugs were being flown into Arkansas from Mexico? So you start looking at the threads and you can very easily see the intelligence community has something seedy and underhanded going on when it comes to things that are going on in the world. And then, of course, if they are involved in things going on in the Middle East, and we know that they are, well, they're trying to draw us into conflict for some reason. So how do they benefit? What is their purpose there? And are they pulling Trump in that direction? I think so. I absolutely think so.
In St. Thomas's Summa Theologiae, right? I think it's Prima Secundae. In the second part of the first part, he has his explanation on just war theory. And one of the principles is that for history conditions of a just war is that the war must be declared and controlled by a proper authority, such as a sovereign or state, not by private individuals. Okay? This ensures that the decision to go to war is made by those responsible for the common good and not driven by personal vendettas or private interests. That's St. Thomas Aquinas. And why that applies to what we just said, it must be conducted by the proper, legitimate authority. The intelligence agencies or a foreign country which is pulling us into war is not the legitimate authority that the people of this constitutional republic, democracy, have elected. We chose. Democracy is a valid form of government. Okay? We chose President Trump. If they're undermining his authority, as might be the case, it's not just war. All right. That being said, we can't operate in a bubble. President Trump has the keys right now. He's got to make a decision.
Right.
We need to pray for this man. We absolutely do, because the force is against him. Like, cut him some slack. Speak up by all means. We have to. But he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, and he needs our prayers. Final word on this before we jump into the next topic.
No, I think we've covered everything that needs to be said. It's just a matter of, we have to pray for him. We have to pray for our country. Our Lady gave us the plan of peace. She asked us to pray the rosary daily for peace. She asked us to pray the rosary daily for Russia, for the conversion of Russia. She asked us to pray the rosary daily for the Pope. And if we're not doing those things, well, then how can you possibly expect to have peace in the world? We can talk about the politics and the international scheming that goes on all day long, but if we're not doing the things that win the grace for the world that are necessary for Our Lady to have the triumph of her Immaculate Heart, we're not going to accomplish anything. So prayer is at the foremost of everything that we have to be operating with.
Absolutely. It is. We Catholics, if you have any doubt about your role and your responsibility in the public square, even with this, yes, there's been a huge de-Christianization of our world. If you have any doubt about that, go back to that moment when the entire world was looking at a chimney with 2 seagulls on it. Okay? Everyone understands the role and the importance of the Catholic Church in this world. Okay? The reason we had so many media hits during that 2-week period was because they know, even though they want to reject it, they want to say it's not true, they want to point out the faults in the men of the institution, which there are. It is the church founded by Jesus Christ. We've got to speak up. We've got to be holy, and we got to speak up. Switching gears to the war on our nation here. Okay, you got that internationally. But as many people rightly say, the war we have right now is right here in this country. Okay. Yep. And let's talk about the immigration, how the Catholic Church continues to be front and center of what's going on with the deportation efforts led by President Trump and our good Catholic friend Tom Homan, and what he's trying to do by restoring law and order in this country. You have Archbishop Timothy Broglio, president of the bishop. We'll start there. Okay, released a statement just a couple days ago about what's going on with the ICE raids. That's a different one. I'm going to read the Broglio statement, okay? As your shepherds, your fear echoes in our hearts, and we make your pain our own. Count on the commitment of all of us to stand with you in this challenging hour, said Archbishop Timothy Broglio, president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, addressing the surge in immigration enforcement actions. He offered a reflection on behalf of the bishops of the United States with some of the following words. He spoke just before the opening of the Special Assembly of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. It seems appropriate to give a voice to a profound concern in the hearts of the shepherds of the church in our country. When he spoke, this being the Pope, to the young people of Chicago this past weekend, Pope Leo reminded us that at the heart of the Christian faith is an invitation to share the communion of life and love of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The message goes on, okay, and Broglio says this: law enforcement actions aimed at preserving order and ensuring community security are necessary for the common good. However, the current efforts, this is big, this is weighty, guys, because this is essentially the highest power, temporal power in the Catholic Church in the United States, the president of the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. Okay, I didn't say theological power, I said temporal power. However, the current efforts go well beyond those with criminal histories. In the context of a gravely deficient immigration system, the mass arrest and removal of our neighbors, friends, and family members on the basis of immigration status alone, particularly in ways that are arbitrary or without due process, represent a profound social crisis before which no person of goodwill can remain silent. The situation is far from the communion of life and love to which this nation of immigrants should strive. Let me pause there. Mr. Hichborn, please give us your thoughts.
Well, first and foremost, it seems that he's speaking on conflicting topics here. He starts by saying law enforcement actions aimed at preserving order and ensuring community security are necessary for the common good.
Yes.
He then says the current efforts go well beyond those with criminal histories. Full stop. Full stop. Are these people here in this country legally or not? Because if they're not here legally, then we're not talking about people who are law-abiding citizens. If you're here illegally, by definition, you've broken the law, yes, which gives due process for the enforcement of the law. What does the law say? The law says that if you wish to come into this country, you go through a particular process, whether it's through a green card, whether it's through a visa, whether you want to be here to try and work towards your citizenship. You go through a process. You make sure that you are documented by the government. The government knows who you are and where you are so that we can start working you in the system. But if you're going to walk across dangerous territories to come into this country illegally to try and skirt the system. You're not paying taxes. You don't have a social security number. You're not in the system per se. So you're kind of breaking the law on several grounds. And if we're going to talk about how it's necessary for a country to ensure the community security and the common good, to uphold the law, well, guess what? Part of that means making sure that the people coming into this country are processed, documented, and have permission from the government to be here. And if you don't, you got to go.
Look, it's we definitely appreciate our shepherds speaking up and being concerned about the morality of actions. We need more of that, talking. But it's extremely hard, if not impossible, to believe anything they're saying is authentic. When, for the past 4 years, when we had open borders, and not only open borders, but, we beat this drum a million times, but we have to keep saying it, okay? When during those 4 years, with open borders and millions are coming in, they didn't say anything. Okay. They were pretty darn silent, honestly. They may have said a thing here and there about, oh, yeah, we need some immigration reform. This is crazy. Like, Your Excellencies, that was a serious, major issue. Okay. On top of that, we know it's so obvious, people, you were receiving millions of dollars, okay, for relocation efforts with potential, by the way, some of your people complicit in the human trafficking operation through those grants given to Catholic charities. Remains to be seen. But very hard for us to believe you guys have any credibility in anything you're saying here. Okay.
Let's put this into a particular context. Let's look at in a completely neutral context. Okay. Disneyland. If you want to go into the Disneyland park, you have to go through the entrance, right? You got to buy a ticket. You got to go through the entrance. You have to be counted on one of those little rotating things that allows you to get in. Let's say that you decide that, well, I don't really have the money. It's really expensive to get into Disneyland. So I'm going to take my family around the back and we're going to go in through this opening in the fence I know that is there, and we're going to sneak in. And you get into Disneyland and you go around, you start having fun in the park. And then security discovers that you and your family got into Disneyland illegally. What are they going to do? Do they let you stay and say, well, you're already here, we're just going to let you go ahead and have fun in the park? Or do they kick you out? And if they kick you out, do they also kick out your wife and children? And the answer is yes. So are the wife and children harmed by this action? Yes. But who did it? The husband, because he's the one responsible. Suppose also you have lines at the gate and you decide, well, it's going to take at least half an hour to get through this line. I'm just going to kind of weasel my family up to the front. And we're going to cut. And we're going to cut into the front of the line so that we can get in earlier, so that we can start our day. And then what happens when security sees you cut in line? Where do they put you? All the way at the back. There are rules that we follow because there is a proper order to things. And if you do something that is unjust, going into the park illegally without paying, without being part of the process, so the park knows who you are and they've already identified you, then you don't deserve to be there. And unfortunately, neither do your children and your wife. So if we're going to say that it is right and just for a park to kick out people that try and skirt the process and they go in through a back entrance illegally, why can the same principle not be applied to those who enter the country illegally?
They criticize, even in one of the earlier statements from Archbishop Gomez, his whole point was, okay, there's got to be a better way than arresting these people, going door to door, whatever, or just taking them off the streets. How else are they supposed to do this? Like, these criminals, man,
right?
They're not gonna turn themselves in. Okay, there's some bad hombres, yes, Not all of them, all the people that broke the law and came across this country, they're not doing evil crimes. Okay, understood. Maybe what we could be done, why don't you promote the self-deportation app? Okay, if you want the law and order, you don't want these raids, why don't you guys promote the fact that if you guys came here in criminal, promote that. There's actually been up to 1 million people, they say now, that have self-deported themselves via Trump's program, right? But it's just, of course, it's a crazy situation. We understand this. This is horrible what's happened. That's why we were screaming for the past, all of us on this side of the aisle, the last 4 years, flashing warning signs that this thing would happen, that this unrest, this, in our communities, which we don't want, would be going on. We didn't want this, but you guys were silent about this for the past 4 years, pretty much.
Yeah. Well, let's extend the analogy. Let's say that there's a park manager at Disneyland who says, you know what? I kind of want to boost our numbers. And I know that our park is too expensive for people to get in. So we're going to go ahead and create this back entrance for people to get in illegally. And then on top of that, I'm going to hire a local Catholic to help facilitate those people into the park. And then when the park manager is found out and is removed from his position because he's corrupt, and a new park manager comes in and says, we've got a bunch of people in here. They don't belong here. We need to find out who they are, put them out of the park, and then also start prosecuting the people that were hired to facilitate their coming in here illegally. Don't blame the new park manager for the mess that was created by the previous one.
Well said. Absolutely. I mean, and this whole narrative goes on even further in the statement. Did you see this, Michael, from Archbishop Bergoglio? He says, likewise, unfounded accusations.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Against Catholic service providers, specifically means probably Catholic charities and also Catholic Campaign Human Development, etc., who every day endeavor to provide critical support and care to the most vulnerable, contribute to societal tensions. So unfounded accusations contribute to societal tension and growing climate of fear. We always say, we'll say it once again, if you're just joining the show, first time getting to know Catholics for Catholics, yes, there are a lot of really good people. Probably the majority who work in Catholic charities are saintly people that do amazing services for those people in need. We understand that. But there have to be people at the top, okay, who were complicit, that were doing this for financial gains when it was not the right thing to do, okay, to just continue to receive immigrant after immigrant after immigrant when they know that that influx was destroying the local communities that were already kind of trying to make it in their little towns across the United States, okay? And on top of that, you have fentanyl coming across. You're quiet, you're not saying anything, and human trafficking, okay? This is not John Yep. Who's saying this. These unfounded accusations, by the way, Archbishop Bergoglio, respectfully, again, it's not coming from us. It's coming from Tom Homan, who is one of the most competent people right now serving under President Trump's administration, Director of ICE, who has said this time and time again. Catholic charities were the #1 NGO facilitating the illegal invasion of this country, okay? I believe Tom Homan, okay? I don't believe what Tom Homan is saying is an unfounded accusation against these Catholic services, okay?
Well, we can clear this up real fast, okay? With all due respect to His Excellency, if these are unfounded accusations, put all your cards on the table. Show us all the receipts. Who did you bring in? Where were they placed? How much money was spent per person?
Where are the kids?
Where are the kids? Let's put all the cards on the table. Go ahead and prove to us that these are unfounded accusations. And I will be the first to back off. In fact, I'll be the first to apologize if you can show all the receipts for all the Catholic charities involved, for all the USCCB involvement. I mean, the USCCB pulled in $100+ million per year
from
the federal government,
quote unquote federal government, from you and I and all of us listening, our tax dollars. Yes, keep going.
And the USCCB simply says it was for migrant and refugee resettlement. But we have no idea where that money went. You show us. If these are unfounded accusations, then prove to us, show to us how that they are unfounded, because we're not allowed to look at your books. You're identified as a religion. And so because you're a religion, we don't know how you spent the money. And if you actually filed with the federal government about the use of funds, well, show us the receipts, show us your filings, show us everything, every dime that was spent.
Well, they might have to, Michael. They might have to show us the receipts.
Please,
Isn't
God,
there
they
a little investigation going on? You want to talk about that?
Say that again?
Isn't there a little investigation going on by
There
the
is.
Department of Justice?
Yes,
Can
there
you
is
bring us
an
up to speed
investigation.
about that breaking news about they might have to show us the receipts?
So the federal government is looking into 200 NGOs that were involved in the processing of immigrants into the United States, legal or otherwise, because they're trying to figure out exactly which ones were involved in processing people who were undocumented into this country, facilitating their being here, providing them with resources and finances to get into this country without going through the documentation process. And the federal government, having provided that funding to these individuals over the last 4 years, has every right to ask these questions, to put them on the spot and to say, fine, you know what? It's time for us to know exactly what you did, where that money came from, and what you did with it. Where did the money go? Who did it facilitate? Where are they? These are questions that need to be asked. And because Catholic Charities and the USCCB were both identified among these 200 NGOs, my hope is that they will be pulled before a congressional hearing, and that in that congressional hearing, they will be forced to provide the receipts. Now, the thing about congressional hearings is that they're kind of like toothless tigers. They're big and scary, but they don't actually have the ability to throw anybody in prison or to charge them with a crime. So we have to look at the information pulled from these hearings, and then we, the citizens, need to start determining who the criminals are, who was involved in this, and who can we contact to file criminal charges against those who do things that are illegal that we discover out of these hearings, which I guarantee we're going to find some criminal activity.
It's good. Sunlight's good. You know, if anything, sunlight will actually, it's an act of justice to the thousands of really holy, saintly people who do work in Catholic Charities and other Catholic apostles every single day, who do good stuff, but they're betrayed by their leaderships and given them a bad name. Right. So, you know, we need Catholics to be involved in the work of charity. And we talked about before that it should not be a government dependent operation through the grants, but it's got to be done through the private sector. Right. But not going on tangent. So either way, they're in the crosshairs. Okay. Meanwhile, you got actively, going on. You got the investigation by the Congress into where the money went to these 200 NGOs. Among them is USCCB actually named in that as one of the, or just the Catholic Charities? Do you know by chance?
I thought the USCCB was also identified. I'd have to double check, but I'm pretty sure they were also identified.
That'll be interesting. So, all right. So there's an investigation going on. You got these continued deportation, riots going on all over the country. This is a beauty. You got to see this. Okay. This comes from the Diocese of San Diego, which is right on the border. Okay. Which recently graduated Cardinal McElroy to take over DC. He used to be in charge of San Diego and did some wonderful things there in San Diego. I'm being facetious there. Okay. The new bishop's there. One of them was actually just named by Pope Francis, Bishop Michael Pham, who actually is an immigrant to the country. Okay. So, but this is a letter. I want people to comment what you think about it.
In fact, came out of Vietnam. He was one of the refugees leaving Vietnam.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And your heart goes for that situation. I completely understand. I remember my parents sponsored a Vietnamese couple in the 1990s when they needed an American sponsor. They brought them over. We helped them. I remember that growing up as a kid. But okay, so this is the letter. It's dated June 11th. Dear fellow priests, deacons, ministry leaders of our parishes, on the morning of June 20th. So this, what day is that? Like this Saturday, which is International Refugee Day. a group of priests and faith leaders are planning to visit the federal court building to stand in solidarity with migrants who are making their court appearances. We know the migrants and refugees find themselves in the difficult predicament of being called to appear, which is what the government asks of them, and then being given orders for expedited removal from our country. This group of priests and faith leaders will simply be present during this procession, as it has been experienced that the presence of the faith leaders makes a difference in how the migrants are treated. Unfortunately, it will most likely not change the outcome. Following the court appearances, the faith leaders will have a press conference so that the clear message that people of faith stand with immigrants and refugees can be delivered to the broader public. They will gather at 7 a.m. and conclude by 10 a.m. If you feel moved to participate, please notify either of the following: Father Scott Santa Rosa, Society of Jesus, Jesuit, or Denora Reina Gutierrez, San Diego Organizing Project. Being present will be a good way for us to give witnesses and stand with immigrants on the day in which, across the diocese, we will all celebrate a mass at our various parishes dedicated to our immigrant brothers and sisters. Gratefully yours, signed the 3 bishops of San Diego. Michael, what do you think about that?
San Diego Organizing Project.
What's that?
San Diego Organizing Project is a grantee of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development.
Oh, I knew you were going to go there. I'm so glad you did. I read that. I'm like, what incarnation is that project? So, okay, keep going. What is that? They get a grant?
Oh, I mean, they've gotten CCHD grants in the past. Right here listed on, let's see, it's the Roman Catholic Diocese of San Diego, under their Catholic Campaign for Human Development heading. You can go down into their grants program and see right on San Diego County grant recipients, San Diego Organizing Project. So right there, they're a grantee of the CCHD.
Okay. So, all right. So they get money. Okay. I mean, I'm planning to be like, devil's advocate here. So fine. They get money. Okay. For is it a good cause, or what about this letter? I mean, is it a good thing for them, the priests and bishops, to be doing this?
Well, they're engaged in community organizing, just like Saul Alinsky was orchestrating back in the 1960s.
Is it community organizing now? I mean, again, I'm really trying to play this out devil's advocate.
I understand.
They're just being there in support. I mean, that's
sure.
You could say organizing, I don't know, a soup kitchen is community organizing too. It's not charity, right? So what's the difference here?
So the problem here is that you have these bishops and these dioceses, these parishes, engaging in political activism based on faulty information, claiming that there's an injustice going on without identifying the justice. They're marching in the streets, disrupting the people. What do they hope to accomplish? What are they hoping to accomplish? What do they think is going to change by doing what they're doing? Now, we engage in the March for Life every single year. Up in Washington, D.C. We parade through the streets because we've gotten permits. It's set up on a particular day. Everybody knows it's coming. Now, does the march actually accomplish anything? No. What it does is it raises awareness. When you're talking about this immigrant issue, what are you raising awareness for? What is your target? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to change a particular policy? If you're trying to change a policy, well, identify it, name it. If you're trying to change an ideology, identify it and name it and explain it. But if you're simply out there to rabble rouse around a particular issue because you think that issue is going to grab attention, well, you got attention. Now, what are you going to do? What are you trying to accomplish? And I would argue that what they are actually trying to do is to open the borders and to get rid of any kind of processing that would take place on the borders at all, because they give lip service to the process of law and the upholding the common good. But we have to remember, these same people, most of the people involved, are the same ones who are out there saying defund the police and silence is violence. And the rhetoric that they use, I mean, that we just saw Churla.
Now, not the bishops. We're not, just to be clear, we're not saying
right. I'm not just talking about the bishops. I'm talking about the whole issue. Okay, you had Churla. We talked about last week, and their involvement with the Los Angeles diocese. So
their involvement is that the archdiocese recommends on the website as an immigration
And
service.
has funded them
Shirla,
before. Mhm.
they what? Sorry.
And has funded them before.
And has funded them. Okay. From we, the Catholic people, have funded the Archdiocese, which has turned
Right.
funded Shirla. Okay.
Right.
So, which is the group behind these riots. Okay.
That's right. That's right. And this is where I'm going with this, is that they're using rhetoric in its empty rhetoric. It's not to accomplish a particular goal. It's to agitate. And that's really at the essence of everything that's going on with this particular issue. They are agitating. And what are they trying to accomplish through this agitation? All they're going to accomplish is revolution, rebellion, bad feelings on both sides. There's no real goal in sight. It's just raise awareness and cause anger. And that's a serious problem.
Now, if they're doing it from this intention, because again, the morality of the act depends on this object, circumstances, and intention, even with just
I
war.
would say that the letter from the bishop is not directly intended toward that end, but he's being played and he's being used to help propagate and give what looks like
That's right.
Catholic moral authority to that particular revolution and rebellious act. Now they say, oh, but we want to be peaceful and we want to look, these people that you're working with, the ones that you're agitating with, they don't care, because most of them are Marxists and all they're trying to accomplish are their Marxist ends.
Exactly. Like, the object, the idea of a priest accompanying a person to the courthouse who probably will be deported. Yeah, they're a human being. It's a scary situation. I understand a lot, really. There's a lot there, and they could have been brought there against their will. This country. They're not horrible people. Everyone that came across, they're actually really saintly people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they have broken the law. Okay, majority of them. But so the idea of a priest being there to support them, not a bad thing, but it's in the context of what you just explained, Michael, which makes it doesn't pass the smell test. Okay.
Right.
Now, let me another angle on this too. Okay, San Diego Diocese is doing this Saturday. Archdiocese of LA, they organize a similar interfaith gathering, prayer for all the disunity of the city. That public showing of the faith. Great thing to show our faith in public. Can I just remind everyone that we just celebrated the 2-year anniversary 2 days ago of the great Dodger Stadium rally? 5,000 people showed up. Wonderful. We pushed back against the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, really one of the first things that Catholics for Catholics ever did. Now, when we approached the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, specifically, Archbishop, we asked him if he would go and be of, and not just, they condemned it, said it was bad, but do a public procession, a prayer event. We were told no. In fact, we were told very specifically the Archdiocese will remain neutral about this.
Yeah.
Okay. We will not distribute the flyers to any of our parishes, although one of the auxiliaries under Archbishop did release a statement which basically said, don't go to this rally, or it was not the best idea. Okay. So they weren't really neutral. Whatever. They chose not to get involved publicly. Okay.
So just to summarize what you said, the bishops in LA said, do not involve yourself in a protest against open Satanism and blasphemy.
They recommended prayer in churches. That's what they were recommending. I meant going
but
to
don't
mass
march in the streets. Don't be active. Don't be visible.
It was literally explained to me. I went to church, local church, the morning of the rally. I remember hearing it from one of the pastors during his homily that said, "There's a rally going on here," and he used the analogy of, "You may be wondering whether you should go or not," and he brought up the parable of, or not the parable, the story of Martha and Mary. Yeah, I remember. It's kind of funny. As one of the key organizers of that, I'm like, oh, yikes. If what the priest is saying is true, I guess I'm being Martha by going there. But guess what? We were actually Martha and Mary, because we did the Martha action and we did the Mary by praying there at the thing. So that's why it's in the
right.
But yeah, keep going, Michael.
But what I was saying is that, so in essence, the message here, and all of this from a PR standpoint, is, as they say, the medium is the message. You're going to tell people, don't be visible, don't be involved in a protest against open blasphemy, open Satanism, and mockery of Our Lady and mockery of our nuns. Don't be involved in that personally. Don't be visible in fighting against it. But hey, we're going to march for this ambiguous problem of immigration, and we're going to march for injustice against people who are who are here illegally, and we're going to march visibly, and you can participate. We'd love to have you. What does that tell the faithful? It tells us that politics is more important than morality and the church. That's what the message is. And that's a serious, serious problem. And it shows exactly why the people of the faith do not want to listen to their bishops anymore.
Yep, that's it. I mean, so they're organizing rallies, they're releasing statements all over different bishops' conferences across the country.
One more thing. They'll sit there and they'll say, we don't want to politicize the Eucharist by denying Holy Communion to pro-abortion politicians because we don't want the politics to be involved in the church. But then on top of that, they go back and they start talking about immigration. And it all comes back to the bottom line. They're upset that they're no longer getting the funds from the federal government to fund their programs. I hate that that's the problem. And I hate actually putting a voice to it. It makes me upset. But I can't deny what my eyes are seeing. Mm-hmm. And my eyes see that they're speaking out and they're marching with relation to something that they're getting money for. And that's disgusting.
It is. I mean, we don't ultimately know the intentions absolutely of what these people, but Michael, you're right. It's not just you. All of us are seeing this, right? And not just Catholics. Again, as an organization which operates in the political world, we deal with a lot of non-Catholics all the time. It's one of the number one things we get all the time from people like, okay, thank you for being involved. What's up with your Catholic Church? Why are you guys so involved with the government and the border and all that stuff like that? They see it, okay? So we're just trying to voice back to our shepherds trying to be humble about this, okay? Like, miraculously, we don't understand this, okay? This is not good. I would love the public processions. And to the credit of the LA Archdiocese, they're having this Thursday, the Eucharistic procession there culminates. They're going across the country, part of the Eucharistic revival. It's going to be there. So that's awesome. It's a wonderful thing, right? We need more of that public showing of support, but it's got to be all around for it to have true credibility or, even more worth. And we don't see that. And so we're looking at this rally that you guys got going on Saturday from the San Diego, Archdiocese, okay, at the courthouse. Like, did you guys organize any events for the Pride celebrations going on in the city this past month of June? I highly doubt it.
Yep.
So, rest my case. Did you want to? I think you've lost and got enough stress, Michael, with this, but I probably shouldn't bring up Cardinal Zupich in the whole Pope Leo. You want to mention that in passing before you close off the show, or anything to say there?
I will simply address a couple of things that he said, because Cardinal Zupich spoke out at the Chicago event honoring Pope Leo XIV, and he had some things to say that were, well, let me put it this way: every time the man opens his mouth, I get angry. But he said a couple of things that I think need to be addressed. He said, first of all, humanity is greatly diminished whenever the unborn or the undocumented, the unemployed, the unhealthy are excluded, uninvited, and unwelcome, or whenever we tell ourselves that they are of no concern to us. This is a completely innocuous and it's a nothing statement, because we don't know what he's actually talking about. What does he mean by uninvited, excluded, unwelcome? If you're talking about people who come here outside of the law and they're looking for healthcare because they want the free healthcare that the United States provides, I'm sorry, but that's theft. Mm-hmm. That's theft. There are American citizens who paid into the system, who are on waiting lists now to have specific ailments addressed, because we now have illegals that are being treated for healthcare problems and healthcare concerns. I'll never forget going into an emergency room once, and I was talking to the ER nurse because I was sick with something and I needed to be seen by a doctor. And I was talking to the ER nurse and I said, what's taking so long? And she said, well, we're getting a bunch of people coming in here who don't have insurance, who have never paid into insurance, and they're being seen because they have the flu or they have the sniffles and they're looking for free medication. And so these people are being seen before. I was sick with bronchitis. I was really sick. And the only thing that I could fight it with was antibiotics. And the only way I can get that is through a doctor's prescription, which means I had to be seen. But you had people that were showing up because they have the flu and they were looking for cough syrup and they didn't want to pay for it. So they were going to the ER. And of course, since they were uninsured, putting them on the government dime, they got seen before I did. And of course, they got served for something that they could have just taken care of at home. This is a serious problem. They are taxing the system. Okay. And for Cardinal Cupich to say, well, they're unwelcome, they're excluded. Please specify. These blanket statements are not helpful. And all they're doing is causing my blood to boil and a lot of other people's blood to boil, because your eminence, you're sitting there, you're agitating unnecessarily. So be specific. He then goes on, he says, we should keep in mind as we in our city, in our nation, face challenges of immigration. Challenges? Challenges? What do you mean by that? He said, without question, countries have a duty to secure their borders, protect the common good from crime and violence, and enact reasonable rules for immigration. But then he says, at the same time, it is wrong to scapegoat those who are here without documents, for indeed, they are here due to an unbroken or to a broken immigration system. First of all, what do you mean by scapegoating? Scapegoating means I'm blaming somebody for something that somebody else did. I'm not scapegoating anybody. If somebody's here illegally, they're here illegally. They're not being scapegoated. For another thing, for you to say that they are here because of a broken immigration system is also false. They came here by circumventing the system. It's not here because of the system. It's not like the system reached down into South America and said, hey, we're going to pull you in here, and now you're here because our system's broken. There's not a broken arm that's scooping people and bringing them into this country. Mm-hmm. If they're here illegally, they're not here illegally because the system's broken. They circumvented the system because they don't like the way the process works. That's the bottom line.
Cardinal Cupich had that platform. It was the first time that Pope Leo was addressing specifically the American church, and it was to his hometown Chicago at Comiskey Park, White Sox Stadium. And he really used that platform, Cardinal Cupich, to go after these, in an indirect way, these deportation efforts, right? This is the same cardinal who chose to speak at the Democrat National Convention, by the way, as they had an abortion truck right outside the convention center where you could, a mobile abortion truck, where you could go and get your baby killed before attending that demonic convention. Okay.
Yep.
So, and he said nothing from that platform during that speech, that prayer, whatever you want to call that. Okay. So a lot going on. We got to wrap it up here. I think this has been a very important show. Please, again, take with you this, if anything, Catholics, know your faith, know the tremendous patrimony we've been given through our Catholic moral teaching, because it has a relevance. It needs to be said in conversations on social media to different people. The world needs to hear our voice, because it's not our voice, it's the voice of Christ. And yes, you got to have book knowledge, but first and foremost, you got to be connected to the sacraments, okay? And pray. That's what we've restarted here at Catholics for Catholics, our weekly patriotic rosaries, which we were doing for the election, but it's so pertinent now. People love it. People love the Sunday, 8 o'clock Eastern time, patriotic rosaries with the different Catholic priests that we do every Sunday night. We're doing them because we feel we have to pray as a country. So let's end this, Michael, just really quick with a prayer to St. Michael. Pray for President Trump. Pray for all of our shepherds too, okay? I know it's not easy to be in their roles. They get attacked probably more than you and I. So give us lay people the gift of humility, but also of courage to speak up when we need to. St. Michael, the archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan, All the wicked spirits are proud about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Saint Joseph, terror of demons, protecting the church. Pray for us. This is Catholic Champion. We will see you next week, same time, same place. John Yep, Michael Hichborn. See you later.